I was pleased that when you couldn't get even blacks on television, that I not only had a black, but a black woman and a black officer.
It wasn't loud in our ears. It wasn't infesting our gut, our conscious gut, as it is today. But by God, there was anguish amongst minorities then as there is now.
Today, we're going to compare two great science fiction icons of television, Gene Roddenberry and Rod Serling. Gene Roddenberry was born on August 19, 1921, in his parents' rented home in El Paso, Texas, the first child of Eugene Edward Roddenberry and Caroline Glenn Roddenberry. The family moved to Los Angeles in 1923 after Gene's father passed the civil service test and was given a police commission there. During his childhood, Roddenberry was interested in reading, especially pulp magazines, and was a fan of stories such as John Carter of Mars, Tarzan, and the Skylark series by E. Smith. 3 years later, Rod Serling was born on December 25th, Christmas Day, 1924, in Syracuse, New York, to a Jewish family. He was the second of two sons born to Esther, a homemaker, and Samuel Lawrence Serling. Serling's father had worked as a secretary and amateur inventor before his children were born, but took on his father-in-law's profession as a grocer to earn a steady income. Sam Serling later became a butcher after the Great Depression forced the store to close. Rod had an older brother, novelist and aviation writer, Robert J. Serling. On April 25, 1944, Serling received his orders and saw that he was being sent west to California. He knew that he would be fighting against the Japanese rather than the Germans. This disappointed him because he had hoped to help fight Hitler. In May, he was assigned to the Pacific Theater in New Guinea and the Philippines. For a variety of reasons, Serling was transferred to the 511 Demolition Platoon, nicknamed the Death Squad, for its high casualty rate. According to Sergeant Frank Lewis, he screwed up somewhere along the line. Apparently, he got on someone's nerves. Lewis also judged that Serling was not suited to be a field soldier. He didn't have the wits or aggressiveness required for combat. Serling was interested in radio and writing at an early age. He was an avid radio listener, especially interested in thrillers, fantasy, and horror shows. Arch Oboler and Norman Corwin were two of his favorite writers. The United States was involved in World War II at the time, and Serling decided to enlist rather than start college immediately after he graduated from Binghamton Central High School in 1943. Roddenberry was posted to Bellows Field, Oahu, to join the 394th Bomb Squadron, 5th Bombardment Group of the 13th Air Force, which flew the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. On August 2, 1943, while flying B-17 EBO 412463 Yankee Doodle out of Espiritu Santo, the plane Roddenberry was piloting overran the runway by 500 feet and crashed into trees, crushing the nose and starting a fire as well as killing 2 men. Roddenberry spent the remainder of his military career in the United States. He was involved in a second plane crash, this time as a passenger. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Air Medal. In 1945, Roddenberry began flying for Pan American World Airways. He experienced his third crash while on the Clipper Eclipse on June 18, 1947. The plane came down in the Syrian desert, and Roddenberry, who took control as the ranking flight officer, suffered 2 broken ribs but was able to drag injured passengers out of the burning plane and led the group to get help. 14 people died in the crash. 11 passengers required hospital treatment and 8 were unharmed. Roddenberry resigned from Pan Am on May 15, 1948, and decided to pursue his dream of writing, particularly for the new medium of television. Rod Serling, by the mid to late 40s, was heavily involved in radio, but radio didn't pay that much, nor were radio writers recognized that strongly in the industry. Serling said of his time as a staff writer for radio, "From a writing point of view, Radio ate up ideas that might have put food on the table for weeks at a future freelancing date. The minute you tie yourself down to a radio or TV station, you write around the clock. You rip out ideas, many of them irreplaceable. They go on and consequently can never go on again. And you've sold them for $50 a week. You can't afford to give away ideas, they're too damn hard to come by. If I had it to do over, I wouldn't staff right at all. I'd find some other way to support myself while getting a start as a writer. While involved in radio, Serling met his future wife, Carolyn Louise Carol Kramer. They wed in 1948 and had 2 daughters, Jody and Ann. Serling and his family moved to Connecticut in early 1953. Here he made a living by writing for the live dramatic anthology shows that were prevalent at the time, including Kraft Television Theater, Appointment with Adventure, and Hallmark Hall of Fame. By the end of 1954, his agent convinced him he needed to move to New York, where the action is. During his military service, Private Serling was awarded the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, and the Philippine Liberation Medal. Serling's combat experience affected him deeply and influenced much of his writing. It left him with nightmares and flashbacks for the rest of his life. He said, "I was bitter about everything and at loose ends when I got out of the service. I think I turned to writing to get it off my chest." Roddenberry applied for a position with the Los Angeles Police Department on January 10, 1949. This position led to him writing and consulting on Jack Webb's hit show Dragnet.
What about the victim? You think Starkey was in trouble?
He was at 4 o'clock this afternoon.
He wrote for and became the technical advisor for Mr. District Attorney. He also wrote for Highway Patrol and I Led 3 Lives on June 7, 1956. He resigned from the police force to concentrate on his writing career.
Giving orders. Do me a favor, friend. Tell him to...
About the time Gene Roddenberry found success with Mr. District Attorney, Serling was getting noticed with one of his Kraft Theater productions, Patterns, which would also become a major motion picture. Patterns dramatized the power struggle between a veteran corporate boss running out of ideas and energy and the bright, young executive being groomed to take his place. Instead of firing the loyal employee and risk tarnishing his own reputation, the boss enlists him into a campaign to push aside his competition. Serling modeled the character of the boss on his former commander, Colonel Orrin Hodgen. Immediately following the original broadcast of Patterns, Serling was inundated with offers of permanent jobs, congratulations, and requests for novels, plays, and television or radio scripts. He quickly sold many of his earlier, lower-quality works and watched in dismay as they were published. Critics expressed concern that he was not living up to his promise and began to doubt he was able to recreate the quality of writing that Patterns had shown.
You know, I'd like to put that down on that piece of paper. This is no punk. This is a guy who is almost the heavyweight champion of the world.
Then came Requiem for a Heavyweight for Playhouse 90, another script which would become a major motion picture.
Put me on next.
You mean he'll go? 8 matches starting tonight?
Yeah.
With an option for 16 more?
Yeah, sure. Anything you say.
Roddenberry became head writer on the West Point Story. During this time, he was involved with several pilot shows. Most did not become series. He won the Writers Guild of America Award for Best Teleplay in 1958 for an episode of Have Gun Will Travel. Roddenberry was asked to write a series called Riverboat, set in 1860s Mississippi. When he discovered that the producers wanted no black people on the show, he argued so much with them that he lost the job.
This Piper's had trouble with women before. He's a dirty little animal. I'd plead him guilty to that. But the charge happens to be murder.
One of the pilot shows that didn't get picked up was 333 Montgomery with DeForest Kelley playing a lawyer. Roddenberry finally made it to series with the lieutenant, starring Gary Lockwood.
Devlin, I want you to take Private Kemp. Private? Well, listen, Kagi. See these
Who would appear in the second pilot for Star Trek. Although critically acclaimed and having decent enough ratings, the Lieutenant only lasted one season. So, Roddenberry was predominantly active on the West Coast, while Serling got his start on the East Coast. Roddenberry majored in police science at Los Angeles City College, where he began dating Eileen Anita Rexroth and became interested in aeronautical engineering. He married Eileen on June 13, 1942. He graduated from the USAAC on August 5, 1942, when he was commissioned as a second lieutenant. Serling was seen as the class clown and dismissed by many of his teachers as a lost cause. However, his 7th grade English teacher, Helen Foley, encouraged him to enter the school's public speaking extracurriculars. He joined the debate team and was a speaker at his high school graduation.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll take it from here. Serling would move to Los Angeles, finally catching up to Gene Roddenberry, though I doubt the two knew each other. Both were frustrated over network censorship and felt they couldn't express their ideas the way they wanted to. Both would look to the science fiction genre to get their ideas past the censors.
The point of a dramatic show, which is used as a vehicle of social criticism, is to involve an audience, to show them wherein their guilt lies. A denial of a man putting his garbage can next to yours, whether he's fought in Vietnam or wherever, by virtue of his color, now you're getting into a universal guilt.
The initial storyline of Serling's teleplay Noon on Doomsday was set in the southern United States about the lynching of a Jewish pawnbroker. However, when Serling mentioned in a radio interview that it was inspired by the events and racism that led to the murder of Emmett Till, censorship by advertisers and the TV network resulted in significant changes. About the time Serling was facing his censorship, Roddenberry was getting flack for the lieutenant. The Department of Defense withdrew its support after Roddenberry pressed ahead with a plot titled To Set It Right, in which a white and a black man find a common cause in their roles as Marines. To Set It Right was the first time he worked with Nichelle Nichols, and it was her first television role. The episode has been preserved at the Museum of Television and Radio in New York City.
All that nonsense about the dangers of mixed races living together on a spaceship or anywhere, and how some parts of our country were certain to refuse to televise Star Trek because we showed such things. In all the years of Star Trek, we never received so much as one such letter.
Next week on The Twilight Zone, Jack Warden, John Dehner, and Gene Marsh appear in a bizarre tale of a man and a woman.
Serling would air his groundbreaking iconic series for which he would become best known for, first, on CBS. Beginning in 1959, Serling fought hard to get and maintain creative control. He hired scriptwriters he respected, such as Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont. In an interview, Serling said the show's science fiction format would not be controversial with sponsors, network executives, or the general public and would escape censorship. Unlike the earlier script for Playhouse 90, he drew on his own experience for many episodes, frequently about boxing, military life, and airplane pilots. The Twilight Zone incorporated his social views on racial relations, somewhat veiled in the science fiction and fantasy elements of the shows. Occasionally, the point was quite blunt, such as in the episode I Am the Night, Color Me Black, in which hatred caused a dark cloud to form in a small town in the American Midwest and spread across the world. Many Twilight Zone stories reflected his views on gender roles, featuring quick thinking, resilient women as well as shrewish, nagging wives. The Twilight Zone had only moderate ratings and was twice canceled and revived. After 5 years and 156 episodes, he grew weary of the series. In 1964, he decided not to oppose its third and final cancellation. In 1964, Gene Roddenberry finally landed his own series with The Lieutenant, but as we saw, it was canceled after one season. Then, in 1966, would come the iconic show he would be best known for, Star Trek. Unlike The Twilight Zone, Star Trek was not an anthology series but an ongoing series, which, along with Lost in Space, would be the first of 2 sci-fi shows that would be renewed for more than one season. Roddenberry noted a number of influences on his idea, some of which includes A.E. Van Voigt's Tales of the Spaceship Space Beagle, Eric Frank Russell's marathon series of stories, and the film Forbidden Planet. Some have also drawn parallels with the television series Rocky Jones, Space Ranger, a space opera that included many of the elements integral to Star Trek. Roddenberry learned, along with Serling, that they could get a lot past the censors if they used aliens to tell their stories.
Are you reading all our thoughts, Gary?
I can sense mainly worry in you, Jim. Safety of your ship.
It's called The Loner. Executive producers William Dozier. Producer Andy White. I'll be doing most of the writing. Our star is Lloyd Bridges.
I think it just keeps piling up until it all has to come out.
It does, it has, and it always will.
As Star Trek was becoming a reality on NBC, Rod Serling brought us another TV series himself, a Western called The Loner, which starred Lloyd Bridges. This show only lasted one season. After this series, Serling would take a break and only make sporadic appearances on various shows. During his break from television, he returned to radio for a brief stint and began teaching. Roddenberry's Star Trek left the air in 1969, with little fanfare. It would be a few years before that show became the iconic series it now is, spawning multiple sequel movies and TV series. However, Rod Serling returned to the airways that year for his final success, Night Gallery.
Welcome, art lovers. We offer for your approval a still life, if you will, of noise. A soundless canvas suggestive of sound.
The show aired on NBC from December 16, 1970 to May 27, 1973, featuring stories of horror and the macabre. Serling did not have the same creative control over this show as he did with Twilight Zone, however, and he became disillusioned. It too would last 3 seasons, just like Star Trek, but it wasn't on every week, therefore didn't produce as many episodes. Serling appeared in an art gallery setting as the curator and introduced the macabre tales that made up each episode by unveiling paintings by artists Thomas J. Wright and Yaroslav Jerry Jebert that depicted the stories. During its second season, the series also began using original comic blackout sketches between the longer story segments in some episodes. Rod Serling vehemently opposed their presence on the show, and as such, several of them have no introduction from Serling. Night Gallery was initially part of a rotating anthology or will series called 4 in 1. This 1970-71 television series rotated 4 separate shows, including McCloud, SFX, and The Psychiatrist. 2 of these, Night Gallery and McCloud, were renewed for the 1970-72 season, with McCloud becoming the most popular and longest running of the 4. Big-name actors, such as Joan Crawford, were drawn to the show, and a young Steven Spielberg made his directorial debut. In order to increase the number of episodes that were available for syndication, the 60-minute episodes were re-edited for a 30-minute time slot, with many segments severely cut, and others extended by inserting new scenes of recycled, previously discarded, or stock footage to fill up the time. 25 episodes of an unrelated, short-lived supernatural series from 1972, The Sixth Sense, were also incorporated into the syndicated version of the series, with Serling providing newly filmed introductions to those episodes. Gene Roddenberry would provide scripts for several TV shows such as Alias Smith and Jones and Police Story. Once again, as Serling's star faded and Night Gallery went off the air in 1973, Gene Roddenberry would bring his baby back to the airwaves that same year. Star Trek the Animated Series debuted with most original cast members providing the voices for the animated versions of their live-action characters. After the Star Trek Animated Series left the airways, Roddenberry would produce more pilots for TV shows that didn't make it to air, including Genesis 2, Planet Earth, The Questor Tapes, and Spectre. Tragically, Rod Serling died at the relatively young age of 50 due to his smoking habit of 3 to 4 packs a day. Roddenberry would successfully bring back Star Trek, which is still going strong today, and have 2 posthumous successes with Earth Final Conflict and Andromeda, 2 series that had 5-year runs based on notes that were discovered after his passing at the age of 70 in 1991. That was our show for today. What do you think? Were you a fan of Rod Serling, of Gene Roddenberry? Who do you think was the better writer? Producer? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And, while you're at it, I'd be honored if you subscribe to my channel, ring the bell to stay informed, and check out my Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise. also in the comments. Until next time, this is Axel, and for Kevin Given saying live long and prosper, may the force be with you and keep reaching for the stars.